When I was 14, I was in a car accident that cut my leg open. The ambulance took me to the hospital. When I was hit, I saw my entire life flash back in seconds. It was like witnessing a fast-paced movie. Every detail of my life was replayed on that screen. I was thinking about all the individuals I cared about and apologized if I'd been unkind to anyone. Time seemed to slow down, almost to a halt. I thought I was about to die and questioned God. How could I die with no joyful memories? What a sad existence and waste of creation it is to die so unhappy with no joyful memories, I thought. I was abused as a child and will not go into detail. I was so enraged that I couldn't recall anything pleasant. I'd been abused, unloved, and unwelcome. It was a terrible childhood. I was in the hospital for 4 hours, simply bleeding. I was soaked in blood from head to toe by the time my father threw back the curtain and dragged a nurse over. My kneecap was protruding, and I needed to get into surgery during operation, and they weren't finished with him yet. Even to this day, it has stayed with me. Because I didn't want to wake up during operation, I took in as much gas as I could. I figured I'd just go to sleep and dream. I never lost consciousness or began freaking out. I was yelling and flinging myself around, but I wasn't actually moving or yelling. "I'm still awake," I said. The next thing I knew, I was on the ceiling, perfectly still and quiet. I was perplexed as to why I could see the ceiling so clearly and up close. I felt weightless and almost bounced from the ceiling to the floor. An extremely high-pitched boom was both heard and felt by me. It hurt to hear it, and I wanted to get out of there. I was boom in a black space as soon as I indicated discomfort. It was entirely void and blacker than black. I've always been afraid of the dark and feared that something might attack me. I tried to feel my body, but there was none. I assumed I was dreaming and couldn't figure out why I couldn't feel my body. I was curious about my appearance because I didn't have a body. I went right through myself when I tried to touch myself with my hands, or what I thought were hands. I was curious about the brightness and where my father was. I didn't like being in the dark and wished I could find a light switch. I reasoned that moving around would be futile if I couldn't see where I was going. I wanted to get out of the darkness, afraid that something would catch me. In my experience, I never saw or felt any risk. I'd say as soon as I felt uneasy and was concerned about my father and where the light was, a pinprick of light can be seen in the distance. The light was coming straight at me in an instant. I was abused as a child and was frequently hit. I was terrified the light might strike me in the face. In order to avoid hitting it, I moved out of the way. I looked around and saw this wonderful, multicolored light. There was gold, white, and pink, and all of the hues blended together like the colors and glitter in a diamond. It appeared to be alive and inviting me in. I was the first to put my hand in, and it felt fantastic. The feelings of tremendous love cannot be expressed in words. I placed the remainder of what I thought was my body into the light and fell in love. I emerged with the light. I was immediately clutched so tightly. It was as if someone was hugging me. I was thinking that I didn't want to leave the light because I felt the feeling would go. I never returned to the darkness. For the first time in my life, I let down my defenses. I allowed myself to become immersed in the event. I swung around and danced in the light. I was overjoyed to be feeling good for the first time in my life. I got a complete 360-degree glimpse of myself. I looked the same as I had always done. I could only see myself from my shoulders up. Oh well, I looked the same, I reasoned. I noticed 2 white lights in the shape of humans arriving from afar. I assumed the medication was impairing my vision. I kept blinking and blinking to check if it was just me seeing them this way. I never saw any details. They were just white light entities. That's the best way I could put it. When they approached me, I told them, "I couldn't see you very well," and asked if they knew where my father was. At the end of the light, They telepathically instructed me. I asked if they would accompany me because I couldn't see very well after the accident. They agreed, and we moved gingerly to the end of the light. I was almost inching my way because I had no idea what was on the other side of the light at the end of the tunnel. When I asked what was on the other side, they said I had to go in to find out. I was scared that if I entered, the sense of love and hugs would go. I trusted the two white light entities to enter what appeared to be a gateway. You couldn't look past or into the light because it was so brilliant. I mean, the brightness didn't bother my eyes in the least. I just couldn't see through it to the other side. I was now observing myself have this sensation as I passed through the threshold. I had 3 viewpoints on myself and a 360-degree vision of everything. I saw myself ascending toward the vast barrier of clouds. I walked up to it and arrived in what I can only describe as a universe of lights. Everything glistened and glittered like diamonds. Everything was alive and sparkling with light. The trees, as well as every living plant and flower, were immaculate. The trees and bushes had no dead leaves or twigs. Everything was immaculately clean. I came to a fork in the road. There was a building on my left. I'd say it was made of a clear, crystal-like material. The structure appeared to sink into the ground and then rise at the most unusual angle. I remember thinking, whoa, this is really great. I noticed there were 12 beautiful crystal walls or foundations. Names were written in various colors on them. Because I could read them, they were English names. I can't recall the names right now, but I do recall telling myself that I needed to remember this. I looked at it for what seemed like an eternity. I could see 2 women approaching me in the distance. I was too afraid to speak to anyone. I had no idea where I was or where I was permitted to go, so I tried to hide behind a tree to avoid being spotted. I tried to get as close to the tree as possible as they approached my direction, and I went into it. This made me extremely happy. Oh, whoa. I always thought I could do this, I exclaimed. I watched as the 2 women walked by as if they didn't notice me. I appeared to have stood in this tree for an eternity. I was so glad to be there. The hues on the inside of the tree reminded me of the colors I was born with. Are you going to stay in the tree the whole time? A teasing male voice said. Oh no, I didn't believe I could go anywhere else, I responded, laughing. This is your house, and you can travel wherever you want, the voice added. Really? I asked. Yes, he exclaimed. I started doing gymnastics on this path. Gymnastics has always been a passion of mine since I was a child. I was doing them flawlessly. I've never done anything flawlessly. I appeared to have my eyes closed and was simply following someone as they performed all of these gymnastics. I recalled stepping inside what I would describe as an office or room. The vista was breathtaking. It was as breathtaking as she is in all her glory. The lake was a deep blue. It was breathtaking. From floor to ceiling, there was a wall or a window, just like the other material used to construct the other building. It could have even been the same structure. I was too preoccupied with dance and gymnastics to pay attention. The space surrounding Earth was just as it is now, black. It was the only dark object I saw up there. I was looking out the see-through wall onto Earth. I was reflecting on everything that had happened to me up to that point in my life. I was thinking about the dreadful things that had happened to me. Growing up, I kept asking myself, why wouldn't God protect me from being abused? Didn't I love him enough to think he'd come to my aid like the folks in the Bible? I'd question why he doesn't defend me. In this world, I didn't believe anyone liked or loved me. In my head, I kept asking myself questions like these. I was thinking about them to myself this time, as I had done so many times before. I was getting responses. The voice was male. His voice was peaceful and soothing. It was pitch perfect and music to my ears. I was going over what I always had in my head. Why is God not protecting me? He will, I heard. Will he? I asked. Yes, he said. With each response, I felt the weight of concern lift from my shoulders, much like the expression, the weight of the world on your shoulders. Why won't God defend me? I wondered. He assured me that the problems I was experiencing were only temporary. I informed him I didn't do any of the things he was accusing me of, but no one believed me. I believe you, he said. You do? I asked. I can't tell you how satisfying it was to have someone believe me. I was still looking out at the earth. It was very next to where I was. The scale and hues took my breath away. I went over the rest of my ideas. I wish I was more attractive. You are, I heard. I am, I said. Yes, he said. Oh, really? I answered. Because when I saw myself in the light, I looked the same. That's not you, he said. Really? I asked. I was reflecting on how I have always aspired to be more beautiful than I thought I was. I pondered what he said for long. I was relieved to discover that this was not the real me. I was overjoyed that someone thought I was gorgeous. With each response, I was filled with excitement. Someone was holding me the entire time. I wish I could sing well, I added. You do, he said. Really? I exclaimed. Yes, he said. I wish I was flawless, I said. You are, he exclaimed. I am, I said. Yes, you are, he replied. So I assumed I must have done something wrong to be abused. I assumed it was because I was a horrible child. I wasn't. I didn't think I was flawless since I always got trashed, I explained. I wanted to be perfect all of the time so that no one could be mad at me. And I constantly seemed to make mistakes. And I didn't want God to be upset with me. There is nothing you could ever do to change the way God feels about you, he stated. God loves me, he said. He does? I asked. Yes, he does, he replied. I wish I was special like the folks in the Bible, I remarked. You are, he said. Really? I am? I asked. Yes, you are, he replied. I can't tell you how I'm feeling right now. I wish I could download and distribute it to everyone. Like every atom of who you are is brimming with love and pleasure. I just want to be with God, I answered. All I want is to be with you. You will, he exclaimed. At this point, I turned around while stating, Really? I will? There stood before me the most beautiful man I'd ever seen in my life. His expression was filled with love and joy. I've never had somebody look at me like this before. His eyes were wide with delight and filled with love and joy. The deepest blue I've ever seen. He was young, tall, dark, and the most attractive man living. There has never been a live human who could match Jesus Christ's beauty. He was flawless in every sense of the word. He dashed to me, and I dashed to him. He embraced me and hugged me tight. I melted into him and became enslaved to his side. We seemed to become lost in each other's adoring stare for a long time. You mean I don't have to sleep forever? I asked Jesus. No, he answered, laughing. I was going to live eternally and never die, Jesus said. This was my home and always had been, and I would spend eternity with them, he stated. He inquired as to what I would like to do. Should you stay or should you return to Earth? I didn't know what I was supposed to do there, Earth, I explained. He advised me to love and have fun. Is that it? I asked. I do, I said. I adore everyone. I know you do, he said. He was smiling at me, friendly and loving. He said it as if he was proud of me. Well, no one likes me there, I thought to myself. Yes, they do, he replied. They do? I responded. Me tight, my hands in front of him, close to his chest. Yes, I do, he replied. We just kept staring into each other's eyes. We were both smitten in the future if I went back in time. It took place on the transparent wall that overlooked the planet. I pictured myself smiling and laughing a lot. I simply wanted to be that joyful, because I was so sad on Earth due to the abuse and growing up being told that I wouldn't go to heaven. My spirit was probably crushed all the time. I didn't have a single happy recollection. I wanted to experience what the female in front of me was like. I envisioned myself getting married and was overjoyed just to be alive. I imagined all the people I would save and lead to God. I just wanted everyone to feel the same way I did. You didn't deserve anything else since your love was wonderful. It was everything I desired and still desire. I realized how many individuals I was going to assist in bringing to God. I knew I wanted to return, but I was terrified of. His countenance never altered, and he never took his gaze away from me. He didn't take his gaze off me from the moment I first noticed him till the moment I didn't. No one would hurt me if he returned with me, I reasoned. Then I'll be able to show my stepmother that I didn't do what she accused me of. He believes me and is willing to defend me. That, plus the fact that he's the most beautiful man I've ever seen or will ever see again. I became courageous and asked if he might accompany me. He responded immediately, "Sure, I'll go." "You will?" I exclaimed, as I ran to him and he to me. He was still wide-eyed and beaming at me, with those lovely deep blue eyes. He hugged me again, my hands in his and close to his chest. I couldn't put into words how happy I felt. We became lost in each other's gaze once more, both gushing with love. I was overjoyed, filled with love, enthusiasm, and the sensation of being in love. I still am, whenever I think about it. The man then entered the room through a door behind where we were standing. He was also quite attractive, with the same expression as Jesus. He seemed overjoyed to see me and offered Jesus a scroll. Next to Jesus was a small pedestal where he signed something. I looked to the man behind Jesus, and he was beaming at me with a beautiful, loving smile. The man didn't stay long and exited through the same door he came in through. Jesus requested me to accompany him somewhere and show me a few things. I strolled with him for what seemed like an eternity. Everything was in blossom and the landscape was stunning. It was a magical place beyond description. I recall traveling down this path or street with Jesus and coming to a house, or at least a portion of one. I noticed a body of water on the side of the home. It was a reflecting pond, according to Jesus. I was curious and went ahead of Jesus to have a better look. When I turned back to see where Jesus was, he was just staring at me, eyes wide and full of love for me, and a large smile on his face. I waited for him to get closer, and he said, "This is your house." "Really? This is my house?" I asked. It was perfect, and I loved it even before I saw it. We stepped into the home, and I immediately wanted to go out to the reflection pond. I was debating whether I really wanted to go back. I liked where I was and was considering not returning. Jesus just stood there staring at me, his huge eyes and charming smile never changing. We sat by the pond for a time, looking at one another with love and devotion. I couldn't believe it was my house. It was exquisite. Before we departed to return to Earth, Jesus had something else to teach me. We parted ways and strolled hand in hand for a little distance. I have no idea where we went because I was staring at Jesus the entire time. I recall Jesus being ecstatic to show me something. I couldn't wait to find out what it was. He just gave me a house, after all. Except for my grandmother, no one ever gave me anything. Jesus pushed open the door. When I came in, there were so many individuals that I couldn't count them. Like Jesus and the man in the office with the scroll, they were all smiling at me. "All these people love you," he continued. "Do they?" I asked. Everyone was bathed in the colors of heaven. They were overjoyed to see me and were full of love and brightness. They all said they loved me and were proud of me telepathically. I wished I could remain and talk with them all. I adored each and every one of them, despite the fact that I had no idea how many there were. I wish I hadn't spent so much time in the tree, I said, since I could have visited with them. Knowing how they felt about me, I felt awful for not talking to those two women. When Jesus heard the tree remark, he burst out laughing. Everyone laughed because they felt it was humorous. It was a magical experience that I'll never forget. We had to depart and return to Earth. We all said our farewells. All of the people were abandoned by Jesus and me. Before we set out on our own, Jesus had to do something. It might be a little unusual or bizarre, he remarked. Okay, I said. He got into me is the only way to explain it. He could be seen and felt in me. It was as though I could see through both his and my own eyes. After that, we left home and returned to Earth. I remember it seeming so fast, but I knew we had traveled a long distance. We were back in space when I saw a burst of light from behind me. I felt like I was always expanding and knew where everything was and how far away the planets were. There didn't appear to be any boundaries that I could sense or feel. I came to a halt in space over Earth. I wanted to take one last look around before I returned to this filthy Earth and this fleshy body. It was as if I were being held in someone's arms. I was loved and cuddled from the time I put my hand on the light. I sat forward, nearly Indian style, with my hands clasped in my lap. I became aware that I wasn't breathing, but I was still alive. The body needed to breathe. Not you, Jesus said. Then I noticed a breeze passing through me. It was so nice that I wanted to remember it for the rest of my life. Because I live in Florida, it's always too hot for me. I have a skin condition that makes being hot uncomfortable. The breeze was just the right temperature for me. I wanted to see the water when I looked at the ocean on Earth. Then whoosh, we were flying so quickly. It was incredible. I was beaming like I'd never smiled before. It's like riding a roller coaster, but a million times better. There was no apprehension about heights or falling. It was an experience I'll never forget. We dashed down to the water and splashed. The water was diving on a much smaller scale than the Red Sea. I was in a sphere and wasn't getting wet. Oh, what a shame. I'm not getting wet, I thought. I enjoyed the sensation of water on my skin. Your body becomes wet, not you, Jesus said. I was a little disappointed, but nothing significant. As we flew back to the hospital, I skimmed across the surface of the water, laughing. Before returning to this body, I took one last look around. Ew, it's heavy and grimy, hot and sweaty, I thought. I had no emotional attachment to it. To be honest, that grossed me out. Where do I go in? I said, referring to my body and right, and then I walked right in. I entered at the base of the sternum. It seemed strange to be in the body. On the inside, it felt like a hollow shell and dense on the outside. When I re-entered this fleshy body, I had no idea what to do. For a few seconds, I bounced around on the inside, down the legs, back up the legs, down the arms, and back up the arms. I began to hear others trying to rouse me up. I couldn't speak or communicate with this body. It will only take a second to reconnect with your body, Jesus said. Okay, I'll just stay in my head until I can answer, I reasoned. Does anyone have a breath mint? I finally asked. They said I couldn't have anything, including water. The only thing I could eat were ice chips. I thought my breath was awful. I tried every mint, gum, and mouthwash I could think of. They were irritated with me. I just didn't want to answer questions with bad breath in my face. I was led to my hospital room, where my father awaited me. I looked around for Jesus, but didn't see him. I expected him to walk right through the door, I never saw him again, and I'm still seeking for him. I suppose I'll have to wait forever to see him again until we meet again. It took me about a year to regain my ability to walk. This event altered the course of my life. The love Jesus showed me has permanently altered me.